Part 75. I've always been curious about what the saddle of the Holy Dynasty is. Biming Qianyu slept until dusk before waking up. He habitually reached out to touch, but did not touch anyone. Panic made him open his eyes suddenly. When he was sure that there was no figure of Junhua next to the bed, he was so frightened that his eyes looked around for Junhua's figure. When his eyes fell on Junhua, who was sitting quietly reading under the window, his flustered heart was slightly calmed. He put on his shirt and got out of bed, and walked gently to Junhua's side. Only to find that Junhua was stunned and was not reading at all. He blindfolded Junhua's eyes with his hand, which instantly brought Junhua back to his senses. His hand quickly grabbed the hand that covered his eyes, and just about to exert force but felt a familiar breath, he hurriedly discharged the strength of his hand and touched Biming Qianyu's hand so awkwardly. Biming Qianyu laughed lowly. "Ziqing, this prince seems to have heard that you don't know martial arts. So it can be seen that you don't react like a person who doesn't know martial arts." However, at this time, he remembered that the palms of Junhua's hands had thin calluses. And it seemed that Junhua was a person who often practiced martial arts. In the palace, how can you protect yourself if you don't learn some martial arts? Junhua now has first-class lying skills. And it comes as soon as he opens his mouth, without any jerkiness. "I haven't heard Ziqing talk about your past. So why don't you tell me interesting stories about when you were a child?" Junhua knew that there were many mistakes in saying it, so he hurriedly changed the topic. "Prince, are you hungry? I've been hungry for a long time to wait for you to have dinner." As soon as he heard that he hadn't eaten dinner, Biming Qianyu was really diverted, and hurriedly summoned Luju and Liuyan to let the second girl have dinner. During the banquet, Biming Qianyu was eating while arranging tomorrow's itinerary. "Ziqing, haven't you always been curious about what the saddle of the Holy Dynasty is? Tomorrow, I will take you to the horse farm to see this saddle after I finish the morning pilgrimage, and by the way, how about trying this saddle?" For the saddle, Junhua was indeed very curious, and when he heard Biming Qianyu say this, he was naturally not polite, and replied with his head. "Okay." Seeing that Junhua agreed, Biming Qianyu began to think about how to take Junhua to play tomorrow. He still doesn't believe it, with his identity and tenderness. Will he not be able to attack Junhua's heart? The next day, Biming Qianyu took Junhua to the racecourse after the morning court. The racecourse is located in a luxurious manner in the suburbs, which is not only a vast place, but also peaceful, and no outsiders will disturb it. Biming Qianyu got out of the carriage and turned around to hug Junhua, who was about to get off the carriage behind him. How could Junhua do as he wanted? Seeing him stretch out his hand as if he didn't see it, he jumped out of the carriage from the other side. "Ziqing." The voice of Biming Qianyu was immediately heard in his ears. Junhua tilted his head, looked at Biming Qianyu with a resentful face, and said helplessly, "Prince, I just injured my hand, not my foot." He really wasn't used to Biming Qianyu's meticulous care, which would make him feel like he was a waste, as if he had to rely on others for everything. "But what if you fall?" Biming Qianyu immediately came to Junhua's side, as if he was really afraid that Junhua would fall. "I'm not trash." Junhua felt that Biming Qianyu's concern was a bit too much. "How can my Ziqing be a waste? Don't be presumptuous. His Ziqing is so good-looking and so capable. How can it be a waste?" Junhua felt that the conversation between him and Biming Qianyu was not on the same train of thought. So he stopped talking and walked towards the horse farm with his feet raised. The horse farm was large, with green grass sprouts sprouting out of the flat field, and the open area was unobstructed, which greatly guaranteed that there were no assassins lurking around. The little servant guarding the horses in the horse farm saw the arrival of Baiming Qianyu and hurriedly stepped forward to greet him. The slave knocks on the prince. The prince is 1,000 years old, 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old. Get up and bring out the best horses in the stable. Baiming Qianyu held Junhua's left hand tightly, as if he was really afraid that Junhua would disappear. It's the prince, the servant answered, and hurried up to the stable. In a short time, the little servant came out with several fine horses with their saddles. Junhua looked at the tall bridge saddle on horseback. His eyes flashed with amazement. He hurriedly walked to the horse's side and looked at the saddle carefully. The shape of the saddle is somewhat strange, with a convex front and back, and a depression in the middle, and it is only at a glance that the middle depression is for people to sit on. It's just that, looking at the stirrups that hung from the saddle to the belly of the horse, he didn't know what the stirrups did. What is this? Junhua asked, pointing to the stirrups. This is a stirrup. You can put your feet on the stirrup, so that you can stand up and attack the opponent when fighting. Baiming Qianyu explained. When he saw the saddle stirrup, he admired that the man who had invented such a sacred object could come up with such a perfect saddle stirrup. With a saddle stirrup, one can free his hands. Not only can he shoot arrows with a bow on horseback, but he can also stand up to meet the enemy, and with such a sacred object, it is normal to attack the nomadic dynasty. In fact, the Holy Dynasty attacked the nomadic dynasty purely in secrecy and did a good job. If the nomadic dynasty knew in advance that the Holy Dynasty had a saddle, then the Holy Dynasty would not have been able to attack the nomadic dynasty so easily. But he admired Emperor Shengdu of the Holy Dynasty very much. And he was able to secretly make more than 200,000 pairs of saddles without so many secret agents, and such a large project would take at least more than a year to prepare. Compared with his admiration, Junhua was shocked when he looked at the saddle with complex craftsmanship. He had always thought that the saddle was simple to make, and he could make more than 200,000 pairs in less than 2 months, but when he saw the complex saddle, he felt that everything was so unreal. You must know that when he went to Jinghe Kingdom to negotiate, the Ministry of Industry did not make saddles at all. So the more than 200,000 pairs of saddles made by the Holy Dynasty were made in less than 2 months. But it is impossible to make more than 200,000 pairs of saddles in less than 2 months with the thousands of people in the Ministry of Industry. Brother Emperor, how did he do it? I'm so curious. Seeing Junhua's shocked face, Baiming Qianyu said with a smile, "Don't be busy with shock, ride and watch first." Junhua shook his head and was just about to turn over on the horse. But who knew that Baiming Qianyu moved faster than him, took the lead in riding the horse, and then stretched out his hand to pull him. Junhua looked at Baiming Qianyu on horseback, quite speechless. "Prince, I want to ride a horse alone." Baiming Qianyu pointed to Junhua's right hand wrapped in gauze. "How can you ride a horse like this?" Junhua raised his left hand. "Prince, my hand is fine. How do you pull the reins with one hand? What should I do if you accidentally fall off my horse?" Baiming Qianyu will never allow Junhua to be injured by his own negligence again. "It's okay, I can pull the reins with one hand." It's not too simple to pull the reins with one hand, because he has been on the battlefield with his left hand and a weapon in his right hand. So he can completely guarantee that he will not fall off the horse if he pulls the reins with one hand. Baiming Qianyu just looked at him with a cold face. "And he had a posture of consuming it with you if you didn't come up." Junhua's heart was broken at this time. He really experienced that feeling of powerlessness for the first time. But this person in front of him was still very good. If he went to ride other horses, this person would definitely be secretly angry for many days. However, He didn't want to see the person in front of him angry. Therefore, he chose to treat himself badly and reached out to hold the hand of Baiming Qianyu. Seeing Junhua holding his hand, Baiming Qianyu showed a smile on his face. He pulled Junhua on the horse, and the two rode the same horse. Junhua, who was riding the same horse with Baiming Qianyu, only felt awkward. Especially the person behind him tightly strangled his waist, making him almost out of breath. Baiming Qianyu rested his head on Junhua's shoulder, and the hot air sprayed on Junhua's neck, which made Junhua a little uneasy. In the end, whether the saddle was good or not, Junhua didn't feel it at all, and his whole mind was all on Baiming Qianyu. The smell on Baiming Qianyu's body smelled very good. The faint body fragrance rushed to the tip of his nose, and the powerful heartbeat always tugged at his heartstrings. Thinking of that person in bed, Junhua hurriedly stopped the lingering picture in his mind, and just when he opened his mouth to dismount, Leng Yi rode a horse and chased after him, and said respectfully, "Prince, young Master Lu will meet you." "Nanchu? How did he end up here?" Baiming Qianyu frowned. He hadn't enjoyed enough of the two-person world with his Ziqing. What was Lu Nanchu doing here? Back to the prince, young Master Lu said that he originally wanted to go to Qingqing, but he saw the prince's carriage outside the manor. So he came to meet the prince. Leng Yi pretended not to see the disgusted look on his prince's face. Baiming Qianyu sighed lightly and said, "Please." Whoa! Leng Yi turned the horse and ran towards the outside of the manor. When Junhua saw the visit of Baiming Qianyu's friend, he wanted to dismount, but he was tightly circled by Baiming Qianyu. "Ziqing, what are you going to do?" "Prince, you have a friend visiting. What kind of system do we have like this?" Junhua frowned. This Baiming Qianyu doesn't want a face, he still wants a face. It's already weird for the two of them to ride a horse together in broad daylight. If this is seen by outsiders, how will he go out to meet people in the future? "Ziqing, you are too thin-skinned, you have to be like me, you have to be thick-skinned. Show off to death to them." Baiming Qianyu deliberately put his face on Junhua's face and rubbed it vigorously. Seeing that Leng Yi led the two into the racecourse, Junhua ignored the obstruction of the people behind him, jumped off the horse, and almost dragged Baiming Qianyu, who was holding his waist tightly, off the horse. "Ziqing." Baiming Qianyu narrowly stabilized his body, looking at Junhua's back with a dissatisfied face, but no matter how dissatisfied he was, Junhua didn't look back and ignored him, and gritted his teeth angrily. It's good. Now I'm pretending to be cold again, waiting for the evening." Baiming Qianyu was so angry that he gritted his teeth. And when he saw Luan with Mo Li, he put away the unhappiness on his face and greeted Luan and the others. "Nanchu, what kind of wind is blowing you here?" As soon as he saw Luan, Baiming Qianyu began to make fun of Luan. One of the two people who visited was in a strong body, as if he was full of strength. The other is handsome, with a long body that exudes weakness, which is pitiful. The sturdy man is handsome, with shallow banter on his face, and the weak man is delicate and timid, always hanging his head, not daring to look at Baiming Qianyu. The two of them move, so that they are quite compatible, especially the handsome man who always holds the other handsome man, who is very docile and well-behaved. "I just passed by and came in to see what your rare young master Shen looks like." The handsome man's name was Luan, the word Nanchu, and he had a playful look on his face. But when his gaze fell on Junhua behind Baiming Qianyu, a touch of surprise flashed in his eyes. He originally thought that Shen Li was also like the male concubines in other courtyards, handsome or well-behaved and cute, but when he saw Junhua, he couldn't help but marvel that there were such good-looking men in this world. I saw that Junhua was handsome. His attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, and he exuded a noble atmosphere. Especially standing with Baiming Qianyu, he was not suppressed by the nobility of Baiming Qianyu. It was incredible. He suddenly understood why Baiming Qianyu would kill those two concubines who wanted to harm Shen Li one after another. Such a magnificent figure, if anyone dared to harm him, they should be executed. Baiming Qianyu has been bullied enough by his classmates and friends on weekdays, and now it is finally his turn to show affection. Turned around and took Junhua's arm, and introduced with a smile. Ziqing, this is young Master Lu, this is his concubine Mo Li. I heard that Mo Li is also from Kongyu City, you should know each other. No? Junhua's hair stood up suddenly. I was really afraid that Mo Li would say that he was not Shen Li, the fifth young master of the Shen family. Mo Li heard Baiming Qianyu say this, and replied timidly, back to the prince. Mo Li came to the capital with his father when he was very young, so he is not familiar with Kongyu City. Phew, it's okay. Junhua's heart slowly lowered when he mentioned his throat. Because Baiming Qianyu was standing on the same line as Junhua, he didn't notice Junhua's relieved expression, but Luan, who was opposite him, noticed Junhua's expression. And a trace of suspicion rose in his heart. This prince still thinks that Mo Li knows Ziqing. And he thinks that Ziqing finally has a friend. Baiming Qianyu thought that Junhua stayed alone in Wang Chunxuan all day, and was afraid that he would be bored. So he hoped that he could make one or two friends in the capital. When he was fine, he could chat with his friends and pass the boring time. Mo Li grew up in adversity since he was a child. And when he heard Baiming Qianyu say this, he immediately heard that Baiming Qianyu was afraid that Junhua would be lonely if he had no friends, so he hurriedly said, if the prince doesn't dislike it, Mo Li is willing to become friends with young Master Shen. Okay, when you have time in the future, you and Nanchu will often come to the palace to sit. The two found a friend for Junhua in a few words, and Junhua said, I don't lack friends and freedom. A few people stood and chatted for a while about the topic of non-nutrition, and then chatted, and Baiming Qianyu and Luan rode horses. Looking at the far ahead of Baiming Qianyu, Junhua really wanted to leave Mo Li to lead a horse and compete with Baiming Qianyu to see who was good at equestrianism. Mo Li saw that Junhua's gaze was always on Baiming Qianyu. And he looked envious. You are so happy. Well? Junhua turned his head to look at Mo Li. I don't know why Mo Li suddenly said this. Isn't he happy? Mo Li saw that Junhua was just looking at himself, and smiled awkwardly. I just envy you for being able to get the prince's wholehearted love. He has also heard a lot of rumors about Junhua. But there is one thing that makes him envious, that is, the prince personally executed the two concubines who wanted to harm Junhua for Shen Li. Don't you also have young Master Lu's love? Junhua glanced at him, and then looked at the two of them who were running farther and farther away. A wry smile appeared on Mo Li's face. Me? Scold. I'm just a stand-in for my brother. After saying that, he lowered his head, exuding a gloomy aura all over his body. Junhua glanced at Mo Li, then looked at the blue sky and white clouds in the sky, and said indifferently, if you don't like it, you leave. Why be sad all day long for someone who doesn't love you? Mo Li was stunned for a moment. Leave? The thought of leaving Luan made my heart suffocate. Seeing Mo Li's reluctant look, Junhua shook his head. He was reluctant to leave, then he would only be so sad for the rest of his life. He couldn't figure out why Mo Li wanted to be a stand-in, but he didn't say much, and seeing that the two of them were riding farther and farther, he was bored and found a place to sit down. Mo Li just looked at Luan's back in a daze, with obsession in his eyes. Junhua sat on the stool by the racetrack, saw that Mo Li was still standing stunned, and reminded, "Sit down and wait."